once again, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have Porter McBride from Louth County Council. We have Michael McGrath from ZEVI. We have Matthew Seeley from the Irish EV Association, not Irish EV Owners Association anymore, I see. Yeah. So I think that's actually quite inclusive because, of course, there are people who lease, there are people who use them for car hire clubs, use them for work, etc. So yeah, very nice, bit of rebranding there. Actually, it's really well thought through. Sharon Digby from East Border Region, and Philip Rainey, who is installing or supplying the, I was going to say rapid chargers, but we're in the Republic, fast chargers, I should say, DC fast chargers for Republic of Ireland, courtesy of Weev. So I suppose we should go back to the very beginning here. So this will be more of a question for Sharon and also for Michael, I suppose. So in terms of forming the consortium for the FASTER project, how did it come about? Who was involved at the early stages and why? What inspired the FASTER project to be, and in particular with a focus on the Republic of Ireland sector?
Yeah, well, obviously it's an EU funded project. So in relation to ourselves here in East Border Region, we were approached by the Special EU Programmes Body, who are the managing authority for the INTERREG programme, to see if we would take on the role of lead partner in the project. And to be honest, the partners around the table were already there when we were approached. There just wasn't anyone who was able to take on the lead partner role. So it very much came to us in East Border Region with the partnership already formed. Now, it was the Republic of Ireland partner at that stage was the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. And then through the project approval process, and once we were nearing that stage of getting the letter of offer through, SEAI unfortunately could no longer had the capacity to do that role, and we liaised obviously with our local authorities who are members of East Border Region, and it was Louth County Council who were able to step up and fulfil that role, which we were all very grateful of, and it meant then that we were able to continue with the partnership. And then fairly soon after the letter of offer and that was signed, staff were beginning to be employed for the project, and Michael, as you referred to there, was the in his previous role was the engineer in Louth County Council. He was appointed to lead the procurement in ROI.
Thank you very much for the heads up on that. So obviously now we've got our consortium. I suppose one of the big things will be selecting sites for these fast chargers. So in terms of the consortium members who were involved in that decision, what were the criteria for helping to select that site and why? I'm guessing that grid capacity would be one of those, but I'd be interested to find out more.
Yeah, well, the sites obviously had to be local authority owned. So that was the main criteria there. And part of our consortium in ROI, we had Donegal Institute of Technology, who had a key role at that early stage of the project in identifying the sites. So it was local authority owned, grid capacity, obviously, and factors like, being in a location that was safe, maybe had CCTV, had street lighting, considerations like that. Michael maybe wants to come in maybe further in that. Or...
Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, I suppose as Sharon says, DKIT were kind of involved in the area kind of assessment, and you could say the desktop study assessment of the sites that were available. So in the initial stages, we went to what we called Louth County Council was the lead local authority, and then the other local authorities that were kind of partnering with us in the project were the associate local authorities, as I referred them to in the project. And they were asked for a number of sites that they had available to them to install EV charge points. That's maybe 10, I think it was 10 sites per local authority that was given to us across the 7 local authorities. And then there was a desktop study done on them sites to kind of shortlist them down to available sites based on that desktop study, such as the location, town centre location, en route location, that sort of kind of assessment, looking at the ESB heat map as well to see where there was available grid capacity as well. So them sort of considerations were done, and then once we shortlisted them sites, we started the site inspections element of it, whereby we applied to the ESB networks for connection at a number of locations. met the ESB networks out on site to see where you would get connection to. And that was very important, because sometimes when you make the application for an ESB connection, you will get the quote for connection and say, yes, we can give you a connection. But when you go to site, you might have to go 100 meters to the nearest point. It might need a substation upgrade at that location, which adds the cost significantly. So we had quite a limited budget as well at them locations. So again, using that sort of criteria, was able to kind of start dwindling down and kind of shortlisting the sites to what we could deliver on the ground from that desktop study. So it was a two-stage. You had your desktop study, then you had your site assessments. And when you're out on the ground as well, you're looking at stuff like passive surveillance. Is it going to be located at the back of a car park in a quiet spot, or can be located at the front? Is there public lighting? Is there CCTV? Them sort of consider, is there access to available coffee shops and facilities nearby? All of them considerations then allowed us to shortlist our sites to the ones that we want to deliver. And what we did do even at that point was made our list of sites that we could deliver. We actually went from having single sites to double sites, because you've got economies of scale at that location as well, and we're able to put in bigger charge points. Again, adding that security, having 2 parking spaces as opposed to 1 for a site. And also, when we were looking at the sites, we were considering as well, what was the maximum capacity we could get at this location without the need for substation upgrade. And when you took all them considerations into account, one of the biggest factors to consider is your ESB capacity and available network connection.
You've brilliantly kind of preempted some of the questions that I had. So first and foremost, you've already kind of covered off safety and accessibility. That's very good to know that it was considered at such an early stage, because I'm certainly aware that there are some EV drivers who are quite uneasy about charging at night in a dimly lit corner of a car park with very little other people around. It's kind of like mugging territory almost. So I presume that you'll have spoken to the likes of Kate Tyrrell at ChargeSafe, who specializes in ensuring that the site design is as inclusive, as accessible, and as safe as possible. So I'm sure that she'd be delighted to hear that this was factored in so early on. Likewise, the fact that, I believe that the original spec for the Faster project was 50. Oh, we have we'll come back to Gareth in just a second and say hello. But I believe that the original spec was 50 kilowatt fast chargers. But the fact that you knew early on the maximum capacity that you could have per site is also very promising, because presumably that meant that there was scope to deliver beyond the original scope of the project too, in terms of number of chargers per site or power of chargers, I presume.
Yeah, so as you said, it was 50 kilowatts minimum charging capacity, but a number of the sites are delivering 150 kilowatt doubles at them location, 100 kilowatt doubles again, so above and beyond what the minimum spec was. And we were kind of that was done. We had the intention of doing that, kind of talking with EBR and talking with DKIT and through the partners. We kind of came up with this, that we would like to get the maximum that we can get out of it, given the constraints, one of the funding that was available, but 2, the size constraints we talked about earlier on. So again, once we engaged ESB, that was very, very useful, but you were able to make a good decision at that point as to what you could deliver at them sites. And there is other considerations to think about when you up capacity in relation to the operational costs as well at the back end. So it's just not a matter of going to the max capacity. You have to think about the business case at the back end as well, which Philip, I'm sure, will be able to kind of attain to, and at what point you get the payback on the sites at the operational phase. And it can, even though the ZEVI have released at the moment universal design guidelines that were out for public consultation, but this project kind of was done in advance of them guidelines, but at the same time, again, in engagement with East Border Region and University of Ulster and in Scotland as well, we were trying to make these as accessible as possible and university designed as possible. And I think that's the key word, as possible, because there is restraints as well, and it's reasonably practical to get these sites as accessible to all.
Very true. So obviously I've had quite a lot of questions for everyone already, but as Donal has just reminded everyone in the chat, everyone who's spectating today, you can ask your own questions to the panel too. So we've got the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Please do put any questions in there, as opposed to during the as opposed to using the webinar chat. We will take all of your questions at the end of the panel session. So yeah, I suppose we've covered off the safety, accessibility, the available capacity. Remind me, in terms of the limitations of faster projects funding, exactly what was covered by the faster project versus the tender winner who was supplying and running the hardware. Who wants to take that one? I'm guessing it'll be Michael or Sharon.
I can take it if you want, Sharon. Happy enough. Yeah, so the funding was for the capital element of the works. So the supply and install and any civil works associated with the project. So once the project then is completed from a civils and kind of construction point of view, it then goes into the operational phase, which is not part of the funding.
Fair play. Good to know. And a final question, I suppose, is that on this particular topic, obviously the shape of the faster project regions and the way that they've worked out was very different between each region. So the Republic of Ireland is somewhat broadly similar to Northern Ireland in terms of the way the faster project has panned out, but it's been totally different to what we've seen in Scotland, where the hardware was supplied to the local authorities. The local authorities put that onto the Charge Place Scotland network. What inspired this difference where you were having a commercial CPO, charge point operator, coming in and basically supplying, installing and running and maintaining the hardware as opposed to handing it over to the local authorities? What prompted that difference? And following on from that, from what you've seen so far, which would you say in terms of the learnings of the faster project overall? So this is probably more one for Sharon in terms of that overarching view of the faster project. Which one has worked out more successfully thus far?
Okay. Well, the reason for the difference in the operational phase was primarily just down to the fact that there was a precedent there in Scotland where local authorities have been operating their own charge points, whereas it's very much new here in ROI and the same in NI. So that was a key from the outset, that it would be handed over to the CPO to operate for the set term. In relation to learnings, do you mean in terms of which works best? Because we...
Yeah. So obviously there's the model from Republic of Ireland / presumably Northern Ireland as well. We'll cover that tomorrow.
Yeah.
But also, as I say, the fact that the local authorities immediately took ownership and responsibility for maintenance, etc., of the Scottish charging infrastructure versus the kind of Irish model of handing over to a commercial operator at arm's length from the council, if that makes sense. What would you say has worked out smoothest in terms of the overall kind of processes so far?
Well, look, I suppose until we're still at the stage of installation, so it's a bit hard to kind of preempt which will work better in the long run. Obviously, both NI and ROI, the term is 7 years for the operational phase. So until we get into that, I feel that both have been, they're both bespoke in relation to the needs of both jurisdictions. And say, obviously, Scotland, their local authorities have been operating the charge points, so it's been fairly straightforward there that they just are added onto the Charge Place Scotland network, and that will hopefully run smoothly. In ROI and NI, it's been fine to date. We just have that extra level there of an agreement that each of the local authorities have signed up to. Because obviously once the chargers become operational, Louth County Council in ROI and Ulster University, who've been the procurement lead in NI, they step back in a sense, and each council is responsible with Weev and with the charge point operator in NI, for that operational phase. And hopefully it should all run smoothly. They have their agreements there where they have set meetings throughout a year to see how things are going. And then obviously they both have a clause in there by the end of the 7-year period where they have the option to extend if that's what the local authority wants to do at that point. But obviously 7 years is quite a bit down the line, and capacity there will hopefully have been built up with it. What the sector look like at that point. Maybe local authorities will want to have a more involved remit in managing the charge points. So
Although it's interesting.
If I could just come in there as a sort of a CPO, and I understand both positions, but I suppose if we look at Northern Ireland and the ROI, it's, what are councils good at and what are CPOs good at? Yeah. And I think that, that's part of the learning curve, is that, operations and maintenance, all the issues of uptime, availability, downtime, complaints, the council have enough to deal with at the moment. And I think, the next period for both of us is going to be a learning curve. Hopefully our expertise, as a CPO, can build on the reputation of the chargers that have been installed. Now, if the councils down the line perceive that to be, an opportunity or revenue generating or whatever shape, form or fashion, or they have the resource, that can be reviewed. But I think certainly as a startup and with the introduction of the technology throughout Ireland, sort of letting a CPO have the O&M element and the responsibility certainly leverages their skill set over the councils.
Good point. And certainly from an EV driver perspective, Matthew, it'd be good to get your thoughts on this in terms of sort of council owned / maintained charging infrastructure versus private CP charge point operators. I appreciate it's maybe something that's more familiar to Scottish EV drivers because of Charge Place Scotland, and I could certainly talk a bit to that, including some recent incidents. But Matthew, from your perspective in the Republic of Ireland, how have you found the kind of general reliability of council-owned / operated versus your private charging networks?
Good question. I suppose the main point I would say in that is that we're not seeing a huge amount of council-owned and operated side of things, insofar as the public network that is there is quite well supported into what is there currently. I suppose it's your e-cards, your EasyGo, and whatnot are putting in those charge points at this point in time and are putting out the network. I suppose it's not really aware to people, is the way I would put it. People don't know, and they're not too concerned from an EV owner's perspective, even though, as you say, Euan, we got rid of the owners out of the name. But the owners that are there and currently using the network are not that concerned by it. So we tend not to see issues, we tend not to see complaints, we tend not to see problems from the fact that whether it's been just operated by a CPO or whether there's a local county council involvement or not in terms of what is the final end result. We are seeing and we're aware of stuff that is coming from the likes of local county councils that are putting stuff into place. It is good to see them operating and getting involved in these things, because it's important that they can kind of see where things need to go in some ways, because they're local, they're looking on the ground, they can see what can be done. They possibly have the bandwidth in some locations to be able to get involved and actually have the conversations and figure out what is the right place. And with that, knowing where are the right communities to get into and to actually have those charge points in place. So that's one of the big things we see is, people who are traveling across the country in Ireland are looking at charge points, and they're using locations that are kind of being used by the local people and individuals rather than people trying to cross the country. So, that county council view and input is very good, because it's allowing those people who are local and need that infrastructure to get something that's for them. And then you're able to get the charge point operators on a commercial sense to come in and actually look at that intercity travel where it needs to go in at that point in time.
Well said, well said. And obviously the FASTA project in the Republic of Ireland has focused on the border regions. And there are, the 7 or so councils that were county councils that were involved in this. So Pádraig, obviously, as one of the very much kind of hands-on, passionate members of the consortium, I'm intrigued to know what Louth County Council's position was prior to the FASTA project in terms of the amount of charging infrastructure that you generally had available, if there were bottlenecks, and how much the FASTA project has helped to kind of overcome any limitations that you had. Tell us more.
Thanks, Euan. There probably was very little infrastructure, particularly for faster chargers. There were some of the lower powered options out there, but there was a shortcoming. There was, particularly for people who were traveling, as Matthew said, traveling across the country. Where do we drop? Where can you stop to get a quick charge, particularly when you move away from the M1? Obviously in Louth we have Apple Green, and they have good infrastructure there. But once you moved away from that, even onto the N2, there was very little there. So there was a shortfall. We see this project as addressing that. And having spoken to some, and it's just anecdotal, people who own EVs, they want to, if they're traveling somewhere, they want to pull in for 20 minutes and get a decent charge. And that's what this offers. And we're looking forward to getting it fully commissioned and up and running and see what the response is then from people.
And another crucial point there is that when it comes to local authorities, it is currently a postcode lottery, certainly in Scotland, as to whether you have ambitious, passionate personnel who head up electric vehicle charging infrastructure responsibilities. So within your role in Louth County Council, would you say you were already determined and passionate about this, or did the Faster project kind of bring EVs to your attention and make you as committed as you are today? I'm intrigued to know basically what the before story was.
It was
before then versus now.
Yeah, a bit of both. Michael had been here, and then he moved on to greener pastures, let's say, and is running the whole show for the whole country. So everyone should take a bit of comfort in that. But I had been aware of Faster. Now, my brother is an EV driver, and he's very passionate about it. So when I got involved in it, he just told me what needed to happen and what a driver would want. And he said, nothing under 100 kilowatts. You know, and you learn as you get involved in it. And as the project has progressed, all of our EV chargers are now minimum 100 kilowatts, because Navan and Monaghan both applied to increase the capacity, which obviously Weev were very much in favour of, and facilitated that with the charger that they got in for us. So I suppose there was a bit of both. You're aware of EVs; they're becoming a lot more prevalent. You see more and more of them on the roads, and in the next 10 years, you know, more and more people are going to be moving to them, because anyone who buys one will never go back to an internal combustion engine. That's all you ever hear, and never go back to driving a petrol or diesel car. So yeah, when I got involved, I had limited knowledge outside my big brother. But yeah, you can see the value in it, you can see the benefits. And it's all about infrastructure now, really, for the Republic of Ireland. It's all about getting the infrastructure and getting good infrastructure there that will meet the needs of EV users.
Well said. And yeah, spoiler alert about the spec of the hardware that's being delivered in Louth. Philip and Gareth, we will be coming back to you in just a little minute to discuss what's going in the ground and how much better potentially versus the original specifications the actual hardware is going to be. But sit tight, because we've got the quick matter of the actual tender process itself. So again, likely more kind of focused at Sharon and Michael here, but in terms of the drafting of that tender, I suppose we've kind of covered it's going to be minimum 50 kilowatts, etc. But in terms of that review process, how popular was the Faster project? You know, did you get quite a lot of bids? Was it competitive? Was there a clear winner amongst them from the outset? I'd love to find out more about how the tender process went down.
If I could just come in kind of on that point, because I suppose was an important consideration in that tender process is what contractual arrangement we were going to go with, because we could have went down a three-step process where you procured someone to design them, you procured someone to do the civils, and you procured someone to do the service contract. And when we were looking at the options available to us, what's used kind of internationally, and is either when you own and operate them, you do that three-step process, and you might procure someone to do the operation and maintenance of them at the back end, or you might do a concession arrangement, which is used widely, I think, in Europe and the UK, where you can get someone to come in at whatever stage, either the site selection, or you can decide selecting to come in at a later stage and deliver the sites on a concession arrangement, whereby you can leverage private funding and leverage a profit share at the back end. But because it's a European funded project, that option wasn't available to us to profit share. So what we were looking at really was in delivering this was what was the best form of contract to really, within the timelines, get the project delivered. And we looked kind of to the UK, and what's been used was the NEC form of contracts, where you have a design, build, operate, maintain form of contract that you can deliver these projects under, whereas local authorities are used to using the public sector contracts, which don't have that operational element to them at the back end. So that's why we went with that NEC form of contract to deliver the project. And we in advance of making that decision, we had the market soundings where we invited EV charge point operators to kind of come and discuss the options available to us, to get feedback on the sites, to get feedback on the contractual arrangements that they would be familiar with using as well. So all of that informed the decision making around what type of contract to deliver them under.
Good points. And were there any, I suppose actually we kind of covered a little bit about any issues encountered during the tender process, such as site changes, etc. But that was likely kind of captured before the tender went out, I presume, in terms of, are any sites no longer suitable, etc. But were there any kind of bumps in the road along the way?
We had our kind of finalised sites and then a reserve list of sites, and that was our kind of a mitigation against any issues that might come up during the construction phase. Again, I had stepped away before, and Pádraig might be able to talk more about any maybe site issues that they came along. But as far as I could see, apart from upgrading some of the sizes of the chargers, I think most of the sites that were in the original list are the ones that are being delivered. So it took kind of effective planning in the early stages allows for that, but also having that option of additional sites or mitigations if something does come up that you can't deliver one of the sites is crucial as well.
Smart move, definitely a wise move on that one. And on that note, drum roll, of course, the tender was awarded to Weev, and we've got Philip Rainey from Weev, and also the contractors, M Contractors, who are installing these in the ground. Gareth, Loye, great to have you on board as well today. But first of all, we'll go to Philip. So what do you reckon made Weev the winner for the Republic of Ireland tender for the Faster project? What sold it?
I suppose it was sorry, Euan, thanks very much for the intro. It was our approach, and I think when our business model, we were focusing in the north, and we were always planning on entering the south, and just this whole concept of the border tourism, Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland, etc., was just imperative. And when we looked at the tender, we needed to bring together our own consortium of best in class in each area. And I think that in reviewing the requirements, and again, as Michael has already alluded to, someone who'd worked with NEC4, was going to be paramount. The fact that Louth had also worked with RPS as consultants, and they were always going to be an intermediary from a point of view of any technical issues. We needed to up our game and bring the A+ team. So our experience as a CPO on both the install and operating side, and then we'd worked primarily with M&M and via Gareth and his team, and they were exemplar in everything they did. They had a lot of experience, not just in the island of Ireland, but across the water. So bringing their skill sets, their experience as well, and then actually the product. So the sourcing of the product, ensuring that we had a reliable product that potentially could be supported on the island of Ireland. Their expertise in doing rapid/fast chargers that met the requirements was key in delivery timeline. And I think when we brought that team together and submitted our bids, certainly in our discussions with Pádraig and his team, and the challenges that were there in a very critical timeline with a top quality product and the diverse spread across the country. I think our team approach, the quality that we had, put us in a position of winning the tender.
I see we have a couple of hands raised. Obviously, it's become a bit of a talking point. Please put your questions in the Q&A, audience members, and then we will cover these at the end of the session. But so I suppose the other kind of key point that was somewhat alluded to earlier on about accessibility and safety. And so we've got 3 hands raised now. Yeah, if people are having difficulty accessing Q&A, stick it in the chat, but there are definitely things getting through to the Q&A box, so I don't know what's happening there. Anyway, yeah, so yeah, in terms of the sites that you're installing just now then, Philip, and obviously this will be a key one for Gareth as well, user friendliness and accessibility, you know, I suppose first and foremost, the Weev network, can that be accessed by contactless credit card? I understand that obviously there is an app because I've used it before and it's very good. Incidentally, it is the best EV driving app I've used. It's so fast and smooth, so nice work on that. But I was just saying to Matthew before we came online here, genuinely from opening the app to the car physically charging within 18 seconds, which is a record for any charging app I've ever used. But so we know there's an app, we know there's a key fob as well, but presumably there'll be contactless credit card terminals on these chargers as well.
Yeah, look, that was part of the prerequisites of completing the tender, that had to be contactless and Peter type system. But you know, you talk about accessibility and site access, not just from let's say an operability point of view of users, but even just from a construction point of view. So there was a lot of time and effort put in by, you know, Gareth and his team and ourselves, going around the various sites. But I've got to pay respect to, you know, Louth County Council. You know, Joan, CEO, was very, very supportive of the project from day one. And not just because he's on the line, but, you know, Padraig has been fantastic the whole way through it, because certainly in a construction point of view, you know, we've had our challenges, you know, and it's, you know, accessibility is one of the paramount issues. So, you know, just transition curbs, etc. I mean, it was a very detailed spec, you know, the drawings that were out per site. And I suppose in the early days, you know, we had to learn what was required from what we would have done before. So whether it's retractable bollards, the accessibility of the bays, and just ensuring that it met all the requirements. So, you know, I think having, and again, you know, Pamela and Sharon were such great drivers. You know, get on and do this, you know, was their mantra, because it was a pretty sticky timeline that we had to get this done by. And you know, and I think the communication, and as I say, facilitated, you know, with Padraig and the team at Louth. RPS was a good relationship, but like, I got to take my hat off to the construction team. You know, Gareth, Mark, back office boys did a great job, got the site, and there were a number of hurdles, whether it's the ESB connectivity timeline, whether it's archaeology, whether it's just called Irish weather. We had to deal with all those, but in a pretty tight project timeline. You know, we're sitting in a position literally with a week to go at the end of the month, and you know, with probably 50% of the Recce search submitted to ESB for connectivity, and you know, hopefully we can go into operation mode at the turn of the month.
Very good news indeed. And I suppose another kind of key point that we'll see is, well, we'll come on to Gareth in just a minute, because I believe you've got some exciting photographs of these chargers actually going in the ground and what these sites are going to look like. But just before we come on to yourself, one question that was sent to us a couple of weeks ago, and it's not the first time we've had this question, was, will all of these sites support CHAdeMO? So we know that CCS has won the format war, but we also know that there are thousands of Nissan Leafs and ENV200s and Mitsubishi IMEVs and so on that are still buzzing about the country. So what's the CHAdeMO situation for these chargers that are being installed?
The answer is yes, and that was the specification. So, you know, one can look at the journey of CHAdeMO versus CCS, and certainly when we looked at the specification, it was there. We had a CHAdeMO lead. Now, that is something that we can review down the line, but at the moment, and inclusivity, all EV drivers had to be supported. So, you know, each charger will have a CHAdeMO and a CCS connectivity. The other important thing, Euan, that differentiates us slightly from the North project, is that these are all new ESB connections. So Porrig and his team and, Michael, their strategy of what can we get on? We can get a 50, but what can we go up to? And if it's 150 max, fine. So we have tried to maximize that opportunity. So the specification of some of the chargers has changed, but we've tried to future proof as well. So, so 150 is a requirement, but there's actually a 180 capability in each charger, so that if somehow ESB can turn up the knob a little bit and get a bit more juice coming down the tubes, that we'll be able to facilitate that. So CHAdeMO is catered for it, but if we need to change it down the line, that's catered for too.
That raises some interesting points actually about having a D-rated high power charger. So if anything, it's having a comparatively easy life and should hopefully last longer. So that's even better. But 150 kilowatts versus 180. You're still getting a pretty darn fast charge out of that. But Matthew, I'd love to bring you in briefly because obviously you are the representative voice of Ireland's EV drivers. So how often does this CHAdeMO question still come up for any charge point operators out there who are thinking of going CCS only? Is that genuinely causing a problem for quite a lot of drivers still on the roads today? Tell us more.
It is a cause of concern. It is something that we do hear on a regular enough basis. I'll give the kind of the absolute worst case scenario, which is Clifton in Galway, where eCars replaced a CCS and CHAdeMO unit with just dual CCS. It's quite out there in terms of the next CHAdeMO is probably back in Galway City, and the next one up from that is probably somewhere up in Sligo, for argument's sake. So you're kind of in a very barren location in the west of Ireland where there's no other alternative charge point for you. So, that was one where we got a lot of kickback on, and we went back to eCars and that, and as to where we stood with that one to say, it's not good enough to take them out where that is the case. I suppose the thing about it is the Nissan Leaf and those CHAdeMO vehicles are in the minority at this point. CCS has won, and that's where things are going towards. It is still important to support them where we can, but there is going to be a point in time where they just won't be supported any further, and things will have to shift and change in that perspective. It is a pity that we have to have the conversation and argument about what is CHAdeMO versus CCS, and for those people who are in those vehicles to be looking at the network that is out there. But it's great to see what has gone in here with the Weev charge points, that there is CHAdeMO still there, that is in that location. Philip mentioned earlier on about tourism. That's a huge thing for somebody to be able to travel across the country, and from somebody from the south of Ireland down to the very south of Ireland to go up to Northern Ireland to go on holidays, to be able to go in their Nissan Leaf or whatever they have at that point that maybe CHAdeMO is a huge thing, that they can actually do it. A 40 kilowatt hour, 62 kilowatt hour Leaf is still going to do quite a sizable journey in this country. So for those individuals to still be able to travel is a big thing, that they can still do it. So yeah, it's a cause of concern for our members. It is something they want to see addressed where they can. It's something we are talking to charge point operators about and saying, look, guys, you do need to support it for a while to come yet. We don't see it being at the point where you can kill it off, as is possibly being discussed by some of them at this point, where they go, yeah, we can put that at this point because the statistics or the figure show us that CCS is winning, and that's where we need to go towards. There's enough there to keep it in a just transition that we need to keep it for that bit longer at this point.
Well said.
I think Matthew, obviously, as the charge point operator in the O&M side, look, we'll have the data. We'll know the utilization of each charge point, and I think at that stage is where discussions may take place. If we find utilization of a CHAdeMO is not up there, but would it increase utilization if we change the head to CCS? So that's the journey, Matthew, and I think we have to monitor the metrics of that, both from a user perspective and us as an operator and utilization. The
kind of solution to that I've posed previously is where you get fast chargers that can do dual DC charging, one on CCS and one on CHAdeMO simultaneously. What you could potentially do is redesign the hardware so that there is a third cable. So you have one that is dedicated CCS and one where either the CCS or the CHAdeMO can be in use. And that way, if you are in a Nissan Leaf and both of the CCS are in use, you've got to queue, but obviously once one of the CCS cars moves away, you can get on and start charging. But similarly for a charge point operator, it's not like you're potentially losing out on substantial revenue because people are having to queue for the one CCS cable and then getting fed up waiting, whilst, you know, Leafs basically get priority access. But it is worth pointing out that the Nissan Leaf, as Matthew alluded to, in terms of being a just transition, the Leaf is one of the most affordable EVs out there just now, especially on the second-hand market. It's also one of the most mechanically reliable electric cars out there, especially on the second-hand market. For everyone to be able to decarbonize, obviously public transport and active travel are preferable, but there will always be people who need cars or vans for specific purposes. And for them to be left behind, having bought the electric vehicle that they can afford, and then find themselves unable to fast charge that en route to places, that would be that'd be incredibly backwards and quite depressing, really. And until such times as a Charimo to CCS adapter is developed, I'm aware of a couple of wacky attempts at this, but hopefully they'll hit the market soon. Until such times as that's on the market, we do definitely need that Charimo support, because statistics saying, yeah, this Charimo only gets used 3 or 4 times a week versus the CCS being used 50 plus times a week doesn't help those people who need it 3 or 4 times a week, especially because they are statistically more likely to be dependent on fast chargers because they'll have an older Nissan Leaf with a shorter range. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now. But yeah, love the insight from a commercial charge point operator and from an EV driver perspective there. That was really good to hear. And I'd love to bring in Gareth, who's been waiting ever so patiently. Obviously, Gareth, you are installing quite a lot of faster project chargers, aren't you? It's not just this particular tranche in the Republic of Ireland, is it? Tell us more about what you've been up to.
Yeah, well, look, we have been very, very fortunate to be engaged by Weev to build the Faster Ireland. And just to touch on a couple of things that Phil mentioned, obviously we chatted back at the tender stage with Weev, and I've known for a long time. And one thing that Weev has insisted the whole way through this project is quality. There will be no exception. Everything has to be done to the highest standard, and has to be done and delivered as requested by Louth County Council. So that is definitely shown through the Weev strategy for this tender, and we're very, very fortunate to be part of their vision and this tender as well. The overall Faster project has been exceptionally demanding. There is 2 DNOs to work with across 10 council areas, 30 sites in total, and 40 high-powered chargers. If you break that down over a 10-week program, that's 4 high-powered chargers per week. And if you add in 8 sites of historical interest, if you add in public car parks, traffic restrictions, nighttime working, etc., it becomes a very, very, very demanding project. But we're here, and we've done it, along with the team at Weev, and we've delivered what needs to be delivered. Now we're down to obviously the last couple of weeks of the project in its entirety, and it still is a 7-day week, 14 hours a day to deliver this, but we will get there. We will get it done.
And in terms of what is being done, if you're able to share your screen, I believe you've got some photographs of what we can expect in Ireland very shortly.
Yes. So, well, we have photographs. Now, they're not, these are obviously from the operational team, so take them with a little pinch of salt, and they are only, should we say that they're taken from their iPhones and taking them, but these are really hot off the press. They're current photographs. There's 3 or 4 here from current sites that are 90% complete, and then we've got some operational sites which are very good to look at, which are really operational sites that are working today. So the first site that we have is in Virginia. This one here is roughly about 90% complete. It's looking well, and it's ready for the ESB connection.
Looking good from an accessibility perspective there as well. I mean,
Yeah,
without getting out a measuring tape to double check the width of those hatchings and so on, there does seem to be a decent bit of consideration there for people with mobility impairments, and the bollards don't seem to be too intrusive. So that provisionally looks quite promising, actually. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, a lot of work has been in the design stage, both in collaboration with Weev, obviously Louth and RPS. There's been a lot of consideration, and you can, if you look closely, you'll actually see that the sites are well measured, both during the design stage, but also when they're on site. So the actual markings themselves is still there. That's how fresh this is. So yeah, the accessibility is taken care of, and a lot of thought and a lot of details went into that. The next one we have is in Sligo. That's literally from a few days ago. Here's the same thing, a lot of consideration in the disability access, and a lot of space there for even people with families, etc. This particular one here, we've actually moved the charger and the footplate back into an old wall, which are required to be rebuilt at the time. But this one here also is ready for ESB connection.
One thing I note on that, which I've had feedback from EV driver groups with people who have various mobility impairments. That site is very visibly on a slope. You can see from the concrete foundation, obviously, you know, the sheer gradient that is on. That potentially could be a bit of an access issue for some people in wheelchairs and so on. But that said, such as the nature of that site, it's not as if the rest of the spaces are flat. So that's totally understandable. And I do like the effort that's been gone to try and ensure accessibility nonetheless. Sorry, it's ever since meeting Kate and the Charge Safe team and the Charge to Access team, it has become a bit of a passion of mine to ensure accessibility. But just as a heads up for future developments, any charge point operators watching here, if there's an opportunity to install somewhere flat rather than on a slope, apparently that makes a huge world of difference. But that said, nonetheless, that site looks very good at the moment. I'm looking forward to seeing that going live.
Yeah, it's 90% complete, so it's a very good site, especially in location. This one here is in Dundalk. Again, at the tennis courts, public car park, accessibility assessed, heights, charger heights, etc. So that's another very good site. And then one of the other ones, which is not too far from it, is RD. Again, the same. Now, this is obviously, you can see this one's taken at night time. That's the guys are working on late in the evening to reach the program delivery times. Now we have, if you wish, we've actually got some photographs live today. we can take you through.
Nice, go for it.
Yeah, well, yes. Please don't shoot me. So we're in Monaghan. So what you're looking at here is obviously our SharePoint, which is a little bit of a background into the communication between the project delivery team, between Weev, Council, RPS. So this is where all the photographs of the daily updates are kept on progression and what's happening. So really, everything is live. It's detailed. Anybody part of the delivery team can go in and see the progress and get a look. So here is a site in Monaghan. So this is the guys carrying out some reinstatement works, just to meet with local specification. You can see there's a lot of work and a lot of detail into that, and that's just the reinstatement alone. That's sort of a 10-man job, including 4 additional for traffic management. So that particular day there was 15 operatives on that day, just working to get the connection done. And that's just really as live as it can be. These are just the photographs as the guys would see them, which I find interesting. I'm not sure if other people do, but I enjoy seeing the progress.
Well, that's the point, yeah. There's more than just plonking the charger in the ground. There's the actual connecting it to its feeder cabinet and connecting the feeder cabinet to the grid. Incidentally, that second photograph that you showed us, where you could see the cable being kind of cut, into the road and then being reinstated. It was a couple more back from there. Obviously there we go. Still a tiny bit, a sneaky tiny bit of reinstatement to be done there, because as you can see on the bottom right of the photograph, anyone in the vicinity who has a unicycle who wants a cheeky place to park it, there is a break in those double yellows there you could park it on. But obviously that's still to be repainted. But yeah, I mean, it just goes to show you it's it's not as simple as just sticking them in the ground. You do have, obviously, to get all the permits from the local authorities or road agencies, Department for Infrastructure, if it was Northern Ireland, for example, to that would be a street works order, I think is what it would be called, but we'll cover that tomorrow. Anyway, point is that obviously there's all that to be considered. Remind me, Gareth and Philip, how many of these sites will have multiple chargers? Or are they all going to be single but maxing out the available grid connection?
They're all single and maxing out grid connection. So it's 14 chargers on the sites.
That's an interesting move, actually. Yeah, because what we've seen in Scotland was that the opportunity to max out and to go faster, which is generally the feedback that I think, Matthew, it's fair to say the EV drivers would want. That opportunity was missed, and we've gone for multiples of 50 kilowatt chargers in various locations.
I think, as Porg alluded to earlier on, in his quote unquote limited knowledge of charging, he stated that, his brother-in-law fast charging was key. And I think, that's been the strategy going forward, to say, right, well, yeah, we potentially could have split it up, but, the locations are good, fast charge, you can stop there for a fast charge. And again, these are habits of EV drivers. They don't mind stopping for 15 minutes for a coffee, check emails, and get over 100 miles. This is the type of process we EV drivers are now accustomed to. And, the thought of sitting, against a 22 AC charger for hours, it's not what you want on that route service proposition. So I think, the strategy of fast chargers at each one of those locations is right and fits in with, I assume, Matthew's strategy of what EV drivers are looking for.
I was going to make the point that it's almost a 50-50 split in the conversations I have to people going, put in as many as you can, make them all 50s, versus, no, give me 180 kilowatts or 250 kilowatts and let me charge as fast as I can and keep going. So yeah, you will have conflicting views that come out of it. It tends to be a 50-50 split. And I think, as Philip says there, I think taking the approach to get as fast a charge as possible and moving on is probably the way we should do it. It's probably the way people don't do it at times. And that's the bit where the argumentative side of things come out of it, and where the complaints with the infrastructure that there not being enough comes from. But if you can charge at 150 kilowatts, after 20 minutes, you've got a considerable charge. You have more than enough to get moving to your next destination and charge at the next one at 150 kilometers, 160 kilometers down the road. So yeah, no, it's as I say, it's 50-50. So I won't say I'm in favor or not at this point.
Well, I suppose the way that you can satisfy both camps on that one is dynamic load management. So in other words, having the ability to share power modules from neighboring chargers and deliver a faster charge if a vehicle can take it, and a slower charge if that's all the vehicle can take, or if the site is busy. And what we've seen, presumably, with some of these chargers that have been installed by Weev and by M Contractors, is, am I right in saying that 150, well, derated 180 kilowatt ones will split their power modules between two vehicles charging simultaneously on CHAdeMO and CCS?
That's one of the requirements in the KPIs. It's sort of 75 per channel. But certainly, a lot of the other sites that we do as a CPU, DLM or dynamic load management is a key parameter, because it is managing that energy proposition. But I think certainly in this, the spec associated with this was a procurement of a fast charger, and reliable one, the sourcing, sustainability, and then it becomes a support mechanism thereafter.
On that note, what brand of charger are those actually? They're new to me.
They're a Gareth.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, I've heard Gareth being bounded about before. Yeah, that's a big name in the electrical world. So yeah, one would hope that they'll be pretty darn good. Certainly sounds it from what we've seen so far. So we've covered obviously the schedule of the installation, and Gareth, you mentioned that things are flat out. It's like 14 hour days, 7 days a week to get everything done. But and obviously you've been very good at communicating how things are going, but like sort of project wide, how has communication been between obviously your role as the contractor, between Weeve's role as the CPO, and also the wider Faster consortium, in terms of communicating any developments and disruption to EV drivers? So this is one for everyone to come in. How has the communication been to keep things, to keep everyone abreast of what's going on?
Yeah, to be fair, when we met in Broderick's office back early September, and we discussed how to move forward. Now, truly, everybody has been exceptional from a contractor's perspective. We've have been focused and have worked with us to progress this project at a rapid rate. Broderick has done an exceptional job with ESB and the other local council areas. Really, truly great job in communicating with the other council areas, letting them know we're coming, letting them know. And in fact, they're actually helping with the project indeed, and they're bought in from an EV perspective. So that's really allowed the program to develop and get done. So much so that some are actually helping block off the parking bays, etc., the day before we come. That's the level of detail that the other council areas are doing for us, which is really helping this program getting connected, because really down to an average of 1.4 high power chargers a week in Faster Ireland. And of course, Sharon and Pamela as well are really just helping any communication, anything we need to do to get this project delivered on time, and it has paid off. We're here. We're down to the final ESB connections, but all the pre-work, the building, the construction, the commissioning will be done, and then we will work through steadily with ESB to get each site brought live. And I believe that'll be on program as well. So
I think just adding to that, Gareth, at the kickoff, it was, we needed weekly meetings. So we've had those throughout the duration of the project, and the key, and everything's put on the table, the good, the bad, the ugly, and what action plans there are. But I think, as Michael said earlier on, there was a bit of effort at the start because it's under an NEC4 contract. So we just needed to get the terms of engagement there on day one. But the roles of all the relevant parties, the Weeves, the councils, the EBR, RPS, M&M, it's been very clear from day one. And through those weekly meetings, I think the progress tracking. And again, as Gareth has said, if we're having a bit of an issue or just an ESB element, or we just need a council to do something, Porrick's been a great facilitator in all of that. So, I think it's been a great team effort, but good communication.
I'll just come in there, Euan. Boys are being a bit too kind there. A lot of the obstacles were removed prior to the tender stage. The work that Michael and his team did, and the planning that they've been working on this since 2021, if I'm right. So they did a lot of research, liaised an awful lot with ESB, with the other local authorities. The other local authorities involved, 7 councils. Everybody was on board from the beginning. And as Gareth said, we're trying to help as much as they possibly could. East Border region, they were driving it all as well, and they were always there to answer questions. And it just was, I suppose, the perfect storm in a positive way, that everything that was done prior to the tender stage helped construction take place. We met in September. It was the end of September with a deadline of the 1st of December to complete 14 sites. And the civils are more or less done on the 14 sites, and we're now down to electrical work. It's been a fantastic construction stage by Gareth and his team, and by Weev, by Philip and his team. And, everything just fell into place. But it was the planning beforehand, I think, had a major bearing on it. And we can see why Michael is now head of ZEVI.
He's earned his stripes then. Fantastic. Incidentally, you've kind of preempted my question I had for you, which is from a local authority perspective. What has anything within the Faster project exceeded expectations, and crucially, are there any learnings from this that you would apply going forwards? Is there anything that you would do differently next time, or anything you would definitely do the exact same way?
Start earlier. construction stage. Definitely would. I actually, there seems to be a huge appetite for faster chargers. There was reserve sites. If we had a longer construction stage, I think we may have been able to install more chargers at the reserve sites, and just I think there's huge opportunity there to bring a new amenity to people. And those sites were identified. I do know one council that will remain nameless. We spoke to them about the reserve site. They had already installed a charger at it because thought, right, well, sites have been chosen, we'll get another one in. So councils are very aware that there is a need for this and that people are looking for it. So the learnings from it, yeah, planning is key. Liaising with ESB at an early stage is key. Having those dedicated connections and your payments made to the ESB up front to identify where the capacity is, that's imperative. And if you have all of that in place before you go to market, it just makes everything else so much easier, so much more straightforward. And that would be the big learning for me. Planning. They always say, 90% of the work is in the planning. And this is an example of that.
Very true. And actually, yeah, you raise a good point about there being a precedent now for local authorities to host commercial fast chargers in the Republic of Ireland. So the fact that other local authorities involved in the consortium have gone, we can do this, and they've kind of gone ahead and taken advantage of the reserve sites. If anything, is good news, because that means that some local authorities are already looking beyond the faster project. So, just how important do you think that is, that kind of precedent of hosting a commercial charging network as opposed to building out your own has been, not just in Louth but elsewhere in the Republic?
Well, I think it is an opportunity for councils, because it could be another revenue stream, for councils. And I suppose it doesn't necessarily have to be 150 kilowatt. We talk the needs in, say, smaller villages or where you have terrace housing. They don't need particularly faster chargers, but they need an infrastructure there. And that's another conversation that's ongoing. How do we bring chargers to terraced housing where you don't have your own driveway? And that's something that's been discussed between local authorities and ESB and ZEVI. And it's a conversation that we have to have, because it is, as we spoke about earlier, it's only going to the market's going to increase and going to get larger. So we have to cater for everybody's needs. But definitely there is an opportunity there for councils to have an additional revenue stream. And they are interested in that. Like everybody else, you could always do it a larger budget.
Well, true. Mind you, that said, I would chuck in my 2 cents on this one. In terms of houses with terrace houses with no off-street parking. The next time you're walking along a street of terrace houses like that, look down at the pavement. Do you see drain gullies, metal-covered drain gullies that are flush with the pavement, that run from the guttering downpipe of the house across the road to the road, across the pavement to the road? Because definitely you get that in quite a lot of places in Scotland, and I believe that Belfast got loads, for example, and I would imagine the Republic does too. So there's already a precedent for, to be honest, quite a slippy metal strip across that pavement. I can think of at least 3 different cable gully designs that are slip-proof, trip-proof, and incredibly well designed, that householders would be more than happy to pay for the council to install. So yes, it would be the council's pavement that would be getting ripped up, but you would get all your costs covered, etc. That would then allow those households to take advantage of any excess electricity from solar panels on the roof, to take advantage of off-peak overnight electricity. And it would be a good example of social equality, because it wouldn't make them reliant on public charging infrastructure. It would allow them to do all of these kind of money-saving hacks that people with driveways can do. So that's just one food for thought. But yeah, Michael, bring it in. Yeah, of course. Zevi's thoughts on this one.
Just on that point, so I suppose just to talk on a number of points that have been brought up, the size of chargers, should you put different locations, and what kind of very much saying is you're going to put in the right charger at the right location for the right purpose to meet user needs, and that's what's key here. There's no one size fits all. So when you're looking at the faster sites, a lot of them are at town centre locations or along en route locations. So in time, well, it'll be demand now, but in time should be high demand, high utilisation, which allows for that higher power charger. When you're also looking at town centre locations, you have to think about the commercial bodies and the shops that are in that location. You don't want a car coming and parking there for 5-6 hours, affecting footfall at that location also. So you want to get a turnaround. But where you have a park and ride, a park and stride, or longer stay durations, or your as Padraig was talking about there, your local neighbourhood charging, then you're into your 7.5 to 22 kilowatt slower charging. And you may even, we're trying to we're developing, talking about local authorities acting in this space. We've engaged extensively with local authorities over the last number of months, and local authorities are now coming together and they're developing their EV strategies. So again, what we are having is a kind of sort of a ad hoc approach. Local authorities kind of leading out some of the ways, some not doing nothing in this space because they're not resourced adequately to do it or don't know what their purpose is in this space. So again, they're developing their strategies, a unified approach to delivering of destination and neighbourhood charging infrastructure. So when we are looking at this kind of rolling out into the future, we do see that local authorities will be heavily involved in this space in Ireland from 2024 to 2030, really so we can move more to a planned rollout of EV infrastructure and not really the kind of at the moment, which is sort of a business-led approach. And then beyond 2030, when you get the EV transition and you get much more people in EVs, that you're able to move back towards that demand-led approach. You're now pulling on data from your charge points. The likes of Weev are looking at utilisation of some of their charge points and scaling up. So again, what we're looking at when you're looking at identifying a location, what is our need now for the next number of years? Still 150 kilowatt done. But as we have seen in the FASTER project, we had a number of sites from local authorities, but very few that we could deliver on. So how do we scale up them sites to meet the needs of 2030? So all of that thought process now is going to be going in to delivering a planned and a kind of an efficient and coordinated approach to EV infrastructure. And what's very, very important is in doing that, in local authorities rolling out their strategies and their implementation planning, that we're able to leverage not only the likes of CPOs and private operators who are experts in this field. We want to be able to leverage their expertise, to leverage innovation and apply innovation throughout this process, but also to be able to leverage private funding as well, because a number of private operators out there have been able to get private funding. So how do we leverage that while also being able to roll out a charge point network that's ever adapting to innovations as they come online? So it's a very exciting time to be kind of involved in this challenging time. And the likes of the work's done on the FASTER project and what's been delivered on the FASTER project there as well, and the learnings we're going to be able to take from that, not only in the Republic of Ireland, but Northern Ireland and Scotland, will be invaluable going forward as well.
Really good point.
Oh, and sorry, one more point, sorry, Euan. Yep. Just while you came in, talking about the neighbourhood charging, the residential charging, and using what you might call the gully charge. There is challenges with that solution. One, there's a CRU you need. It's a private wires in Ireland. You're not the only person that can put electrical infrastructure into public domain is the ESB without special permission from the CRU to do so. So that's one challenge with that. Another challenge could be with that solution is public liability claim. So you could imagine someone putting in a cable in and plugging it in is fine, but that gully gets, as it does, filled up with dirt over time, and all of a sudden the cable's laying on top and someone trips. So is it a public liability claim for the council? Is it a public liability claim on the car insurance? Is it a public liability claim on the person's house insurance? So there is challenges with that solution. We may over time be able to overcome that and come up with a good solution for that. But at the moment, that gully charge is not a workable solution.
Yeah, good point about the liability side of things, actually, and the kind of ESB trailing cables. There's been discussions about this recently about potentially kind of earthing the cable gully itself, for example, and also in terms of liability insurance, there was even the concept of getting, say, Gully as the company is one of many that are out there, but getting them to have like blanket liability insurance, and also what Oxfordshire County Council have done with their Gully experiment. Or trials, I should say, is they've got a nominal fee that the household pays to the council once a year for someone to come along and pressure wash out the gully and get rid of all of the dirt and so on that you allude to. So yeah, it's still very much a development in progress, but there's some interesting developments being made there. And I think that the crucial thing is that local authorities and ZEVI probably shouldn't assume that EV drivers are just going to want this stuff handed to them. There'll be a lot of households that are willing to pay for the channels to be installed in the pavement and for that to be, upkept, basically, or maintained adequately going forwards. Matthew, would that be a fair assumption, do you think?
It would, and I suppose it goes back to a question as well with convenience. So people go, are the likes of the charging network on our motorways going to be, is there a business for charge points to be put in across anywhere? Is one that I've had in the past as well. And the answer is yes. People already pay for their fuel, petrol and diesel in their cars at a higher cent per litre for what they get on a motorway versus they get in a local town. So convenience, people will pay for convenience. So if they can have that channel at home and it costs a little bit more additional yearly fee, as you've talked about there, Euan, that's something that people are going to take on, and they're probably going to be happy to do it, to know I can have my cable running from my house to my car outside, where otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do this, and it would be inconvenient to them. Now, that's not to say that the other solutions out there that are possible aren't. It's not such a thing where you're parking your car, a mile or away or 2 kilometers away, and you kind of have to trudge up and down every time you want to get it. There are going to be good solutions from that perspective. And I know from talking to Michael what's going on in the neighborhood side of things, that there's a lot of work going on there. But convenience, people will pay for the convenience. They'll take that little hit and go with it.
Oh, yeah. Because even if you do have the ability to charge at home, you need to go out and about occasionally. When I drove my EV down to Johnston House for ZEVI's excellent decarbonisation of transport event last month. It was SEAI, sorry. But yeah, it was their excellent event. If there were no fast / superchargers en route, that would have been profoundly sucky because I would have not made it. So yeah, even if you can charge at home, there will be those times when you need to out and about. So even if Philip was slightly going, oh no, the thought of cable gullies, possibly eating into the residential on-street charging market, no, there's definitely still demand for these fast chargers. Anyone who thinks that if everyone can charge at home, there'd be no need for public charging infrastructure, has not driven an EV, basically. But I don't think anyone's saying that. But anyway.
I think you and as a CPO, Michael's quite right. The charger type has to suit the need and the user and the location, and that's all part of it. It's inclusivity is sort of one of the key issues. If you think in Northern Ireland, there's a very high percentage of car drivers are mobility, and they live in terraced or apartment properties. How does the EV market address their needs, and particularly through a mobility issue? So, your gully system is one potential route. Whether Michael and his team, you talk about a community pool area where there's a better tariff rate, so that they're not discriminated against from a point of view of having to charge up on the route and fast chargers. So there's a whole sort of political needs user requirement piece that has to be done, and that has to be part of the strategy documents that Michael was mentioning.
Oh yeah. That said, having seen ZEVI's strategy, is looking pretty darn promising, actually. Yeah, it's great to see that there's so much knowledge, which clearly comes from not just listening to EV drivers, but driving them personally, or for business, and actually understanding the needs, but also the ambition. It's looking pretty promising, I would say. And on that note, the Faster project. So Michael, obviously you moved from being in Louth County Council to heading up ZEVI during this project. And we now have the likes of Porrig, who clearly is exemplary when it comes to an EV infrastructure officer within a county council. Is it fair to say that the Faster project has improved / provided competence to local authorities when it comes to electric vehicles? Or has it basically just been a case of everyone who was involved in the border regions just incidentally happened to know what they were talking about? Or has this genuinely been a positive educational experience that will benefit ZEVI as a whole?
I just correct, and Porrick has given me promotion and you've given me promotion there. I'm not the head of ZEVI. Philip Rainey is the head of ZEVI. I'm the head of local infrastructure. Just to so thank you, Annika. But on that, it's been a learning curve. So Sharon would attest at the start. We all come into it. We had delivered projects. We knew how to deliver projects, infrastructure projects, but not necessarily EV infrastructure projects. So the huge learning was, I think you might have said it when you looked at some of the photographs there that Gareth shared, was it's not just a matter of putting a charge point in at a location. It was to understand the process to get to that point, that the planning to get to that point, what you consider to get to that point, the risks you have to identify and mitigate against to allow you to get to that point, that when Gareth and Porrick are working together and delivering that project, that they're able to roll it as quick as they can. And again, there's going to be hurdles. I'm sure they came across hurdles they had to overcome, but it's just through that process, that kind of process of identifying your risks and moving forward with the project as best you can. So I think there's huge learnings from the process. There's huge learnings that we're going to apply into that kind of regionalisation and that local authority lead. So as we roll out this infrastructure, we have AFFR targets that we have to meet. So there's a significant amount of infrastructure that has to be rolled out. There's going to be private players in that market. It's going to be en route that's going to be in that market, and there's going to be local authorities. So it's how do we leverage local authority resources to deliver them? And we're looking at kind of mirroring that model that FASTR kind of set up in relation to that regional approach, where you regionalise an area. For example, Donegal, we're looking at agreeing with local authorities, regionalisation of, for example, Donegal, Sligo, Galway, Mayo and Clare, for example. And what that allows you to do in that situation, say, for example, with Donegal, that are looking to be lead in that strategy development in that location, is you leverage private resources. So you're not all competing with each other to get a consultant to come in and do a strategy. You can look at a regional approach. So the Wide Atlantic Way, are we addressing the needs of the Wide Atlantic Way down along that region, while also looking at local needs in local authorities, your local neighbourhood charging, your local destination charging, and also allowing for a collaborative approach. You're engaging with the likes of Weev and the private charge point operators, right? Where are you rolling out infrastructure over the next number of years? We want to complement each other, not be necessarily competing with each other, but also at the same time making sure you provide a competitive market for pricing as well. So it's a fine art really to try and bring it all together. And then again, in TAI and ZEVI, we're looking at rolling out the en route charging network as well. Again, aligning with what they're doing, because a lot of destination chargers, as you've seen in the FASTR project, are also on the national road networks, like RD, for example. It's a destination location, but it's also an en route location. So again, just trying to bring all them different kind of factors together to deliver a cohesive infrastructure that allows for the transition of EVs.
Well said once again. And actually, I suppose there are some similarities to a consultation that was brought to my attention yesterday from Cornwall Council. So again, very rural, very touristy. Maybe some parallels to be drawn with the Wild Atlantic Way. And again, they've been incredibly ambitious with their strategy for electric vehicles. One of the things they were saying was that they were going to leverage private capital by allowing access for the likes of Weev to lucrative, fast charging sites. But you also have to provide chargers in these more quiet locations, or these council estates for on-street residential parking and so on, in order to get access to the really juicy, lucrative sites. So, I mean,
Michael, if I could just, a point Michael made there, Euan, is critical, is that there needs to be a bit more collaboration from CPOs and like ZEVI or DFI in Northern Ireland, because the limiting resource is power. So we don't want to be sort of bidding for connections and restricting capabilities. Whereas if we can work with ZEVI to say, right, look, our plan, or here are potential sites we're looking at, where does that fit in with your plan? So that it is a bit like, faster in a certain way. You're trying to group projects together, and if we can do that from governmental support, but also private investment in the commercial element, it's best for both parties.
Again, really good point, especially when we're dealing with a grid that is in the process of being upgraded, but obviously is somewhat restricted in capacity in some areas. So great to hear that everyone is quite well aligned in this, and one would hope that the Faster project has played at least a small but significant role in helping to achieve that. I think it's fair to say from what we've heard today that it's been okay. You know, it's been a hard slog for Gareth and the team towards the end, but it's you know, it has been a positive experience. I've certainly been pleasantly surprised by what I've heard about the level of proactivity and ambition that we've seen, and the fact that there's going to be a legacy beyond the Faster project. There's clearly a vision for the Republic of Ireland's charging infrastructure, both from the government and from private charging networks, moving way beyond the end of the Faster project. So that is great to see. And on that note, I reckon we should take some questions from our attendees today. So James Watson asks, did you find the planning system in the Republic of Ireland to be a hurdle to overcome, or was it a facilitator to help secure planning consent for charging points? And were there any specific planning challenges? So who wants to take that one?
Take that if you want.
Sure.
So, because we're involved at the time, so all of the sites that we had, we had a tight timeline for delivery, and there's planning exemptions out there where you can install planners charged that exempt from planning. So, for example, that was one of the considerations. We didn't have to we ensure we complied with them exemptions. We engaged with planners through the process to make sure that they were happy that we did. So we were able to. So again, if you're putting in a large charging hub, for example, 5, 6, 7, 8 chargers, then you're going to have to go for planning. So again, through this process, we looked at how we could streamline the process. And as we were putting in one, what we call them, double charger at these locations, they were planning exempt. So just make sure we comply with the exemptions.
Thank you very much. We have an anonymous question here, but it's a good one, actually. So given that the Faster project aims to ensure that the availability of public charging stations is not a major obstacle to EV drivers and to EV market penetration, was interoperability with existing apps considered? So this is probably one for the consortium again, Sharon and yourself, Michael. But i.e., will the Faster project chargers that appear will the Faster project chargers appear on existing app/networks without the need for drivers to download an additional app or use the payment terminal? So this is someone who clearly doesn't want to use credit cards or RFID, but possibly has a roaming app of some description, a bit like Hubject or Octopus Electroverse or ZapPay or similar. So actually, I'm going to come to Philip first and foremost, because Weev obviously has an app. Are you on roaming networks as well? Oh, you're on mute, by the way.
Look, it's something we're looking at from a point of view. Obviously, in the build-up of our users, it was critical that, you know, we had our user base, but, you know, I think obviously ZapMap and other apps are there, and we have to avail of those. And certainly, you know, to use it, you know, the Peter process and requirement as well sort of brings a lot of things together. So, you know, it wasn't within the specification, but certainly it's something that, you know, we want to bring our users to, but at the same time, we want to make it a pleasant user experience to both find it and operate the charge point.
So Sharon and Michael, anything you want to add on that? Looks good. What I will say from personal experience, having just come back from Belfast and used the Weev network for the first time, no word of a lie, the Weev app is the easiest, fastest, smoothest EV charging app I've ever used. And I use ZapMap all the time. I use ChargePlace Scotland, which on a scale of 1 to 10 is clunky as hell. I use PodPoint, that seems to love using all the resources on your phone, and it takes ages to load and it's really sluggish. The Weev one, obviously I had to download and register and blah, blah, blah. But the second time I used it, well, first of all, it was easy enough to download and register. The second time I used it, I went from opening the app to the car physically charging, taking on electrons in 18 seconds. It is insanely fast. And in terms of roaming services, I agree with you. I do like the interoperability of roaming apps. I also like the interoperability of roaming RFID cards, like Power, for example. But that app, the Weev app, if anything, I would rather access other networks' charge points when I need them via the Weev app than access Weev charge points via some of the roaming apps I've used. I don't know who your devs are, Philip, but they need a raise. It's such a good app. And that comes from genuine first-hand experience. So we have another question here from Kevin Ramsey. Are the chargers directly supplied from the electricity network, or are they on a private cable network? So yeah,
I can take that.
one?
Yeah, all of our chargers have their own connections to the ESB network. They're all 3-phase. So the applications were made, and yeah, so they're not via anywhere else. They're all their own connections. Each county council had to apply for it. So the connection actually belongs to the local authority. They made the application. So yeah, it's a direct connection to the ESB network.
I think as a CPO, it's a different scenario, north and south. So the north, the connections are all behind the meter, so they are coming via the customer, whereas these are all direct. So our engagement has been with ESB billing, etc. Would be ESB tariffs, etc. Whoever the energy provider is, and that gives a bit of flex. Whereas behind the meter, maybe it might be a quicker connection, subject to MIC availability. But obviously that becomes a different challenge for the provider and whose wire this is coming off, just on how they manage and control and prioritize. And certainly DLM could be a critical issue in those going forward.
I see we now have 3 hands raised, so I suspect that Zoom might be having issues with the Q&A function. Inga Davidson, I've noticed, has been very patiently waiting, hand raised, for most of this. So come on in. It'd be good to hear from you. We should hopefully be able to hear you now. Oh, there we go. If I ask you to unmute. I've just asked you to unmute, apparently. Let's see if that's going to behave itself now. Can we hear you?
Sorry, I clicked it by mistake.
All right. No problem, Inga. Well, thank you very much for your brief but valued contribution. So I think it was Andrew O'Mullane next, so we will allow you to talk. We'll ask you to unmute. There we go. We should hopefully be able to hear you now, Andrew. Unless it's another technical hitch with the hand raise function. Hi, Andrew. Let's see if we can go for a hat trick of accidental hand raises. I'm going to give you 5 seconds, Andrew. I think, unfortunately, Zoom is either Zoom's having stage fright or you're having stage fright or mic issues. So we'll have to come back to you. And finally, John Carolan. Oh, hang on, we've got Inga hand raised again. That's it. Oh, okay. Okay, so John, I'll ask you to unmute.
Yeah, apologies about that, Euan. That's another accidental one.
Way hat trick. That's awesome. I have no idea. Where's the hand raise function actually? Oh, reactions. There we go. Is it in here? I'm just trying to see if I can do it as well. There we go. I'm in solidarity, I've raised my hand with you all. There we go. But yeah, we do have one final question, I guess, and that is for Donald, who is hopefully still lurking about in the background. Hi, Donald. So obviously the FASTER project did have some kind of public outreach content taking place in the Republic of Ireland, courtesy of Caroline Kidd, I believe, doing a series of EV reviews and interviews. So tell us more about the public outreach aspects for the Republic of Ireland part of the FASTER project.
Yeah, thank you, Euan. Obviously, as you've alluded to, over the past 6 months, we've had the second series of the EV Talk review films, and Caroline has been hosting those, and for each of them she's been joined by a special guest. So we had Peter Bracken and Simon Acton, who are obviously both current and former members of the Irish Electric Vehicle Association, and you know, they've been very, very supportive of the project the whole way through. We also most recently had Paolo Ross, who is a Cool FM broadcaster here in Northern Ireland, but has been very supportive of the FASTER project over the past 2 years. So it has been great actually to bring electric vehicle drivers into the film series, and you know, let them take part in the review, in the reviews that we've produced. And the feedback from the films, including your own films that were developed as part of the first series, has been very, very positive. And I think from the survey results of the survey that we recently had distributed, and we're currently working on the analysis of, the learnings over the past 2 years, you know, a significant percentage of those who responded to the survey, and that includes motorists, have said that their knowledge of electric vehicles and sort of driving electric vehicles and that has increased, quite greatly over the past 2 years. So that's a big thing for us, because sharing the knowledge, sharing out the learnings, as we've been doing through these webinars and through the review films, has been a key deliverable for the FASTER project. It's not just about the charging infrastructure. That may be the key deliverable, but for us here at Southwest College, it has been about that wider engagement piece, and I suppose communicating the benefits of electric vehicle use and the role that they play in that sort of just transition and sustainability and all of that. We obviously had roadshow events in both Scotland and in Northern Ireland. Now, we didn't have a roadshow as such in the Republic of Ireland, but we are having our closing event for the FASTER project now on the 6th of December. So we're very much looking forward to that, and it will be very much a stakeholder event. But also, what we have been doing is sort of reaching out to various different groups and organizations and sharing that knowledge in any way we can. And recently too, we've been working with Andrew and the team at Cenex on the rollout of the Nevis platform to any of the local authorities who are looking at developing their electrification strategies. So we're delighted to say that some of the councils now in the border region are making use of Nevis to really help them develop out their own EV and charging infrastructure strategies. So we should hopefully be seeing some good outputs from that over the coming months. So as I say, it's been great over the past 2.5 years now to work with many of the people that we see on screen today. And some of you, obviously, we've just been working with over the past few months, but have been integral to the delivery of the FASTER project. So we're looking forward to having everybody at the event in Dundalk on the 6th of December. And I suppose we're really just thankful that we're at this point in the project now, through the dedication of Philip and his team and Gareth and his colleagues. But obviously Pádraig and the work that Michael would have done before him in Louth County Council, we wouldn't have been able to achieve what we have through the FASTER project without everybody that's here today. That includes obviously yourself, Euan, and the work that you have done with us on the project, and sharing all that knowledge, because it has been incredibly useful for us all. So again, I suppose on behalf of Southwest College and the project partnership, I do want to extend our thanks for the work that you've done through the review films and the webinars. And yeah, it'll obviously, FASTER itself is coming to an end, but the work that Zevi is doing and other initiatives out there, there's still a huge amount of work to do. But looking forward to obviously seeing what comes next.
Very kind of you, Donal. And yeah, likewise, it's been a pleasure working with you all. And it's great to see the position that the Republic of Ireland is in now moving forward. So the EV charging infrastructure future is looking pretty rosy now. And yeah, it's a shame that the FAST project comes to an end, but clearly, that baton is passed on to Zevi and to numerous very proactive charging networks.
Yeah, I just see you, and there's one final question.
Yeah, I was going to say this would be a natural stopping point, wouldn't it? But Kevin's in again asking, what's the most challenging construction issue? So who wants to take that one quickly? What's the most challenging construction issue we've encountered particularly in the Republic of Ireland with the FASTER project?
Okay, I'll go with that. Challenge most construction issue collectively was the program. Program was exceptionally tight. Basically 10 weeks. So that for us was deliverable. Now, what does that mean? Okay, so 10 weeks literally. We're trying to get and Philip voices as well. You're trying to get chargers procured, delivered from Europe, brought into Ireland, get them commissioned, which has a 6, 7, 8 week lead in alone. Then you have the ESB cabinets, which is a 4 or 5 week lead in alone. The procurement of cable and deliveries all in this short space of time. And you mash that into the condensing of the 14 sites across 7 different council areas, and it's 1 charger per site. That brings it its own complications, because you get roadable license, permits, people, live sites. Put that all in a nice pot, mix it up, then you've got 8 of those sites are archaeology of interest. So that slows down progress as well. Once we're finished with that, we had 3 storms in the middle of it, which to be fair, you know, it's comical when you think about it. So we've got 3 different storms in the middle of a 10-week program, which is delayed each time there's a storm. You're talking about a delay of 3 days per storm, which is nine additional days, which is 2 weeks, just under 2 weeks. How do you overcome all that? Literally, it is teamwork. Everybody on this call is just teamwork. Okay, we've been hit with another storm, another issue, another bit of detail. How do we get over it? How do we work through it? And this project wouldn't have been delivered without the contribution of everybody, and to every EV builder, to every council, to every person who's listening to this. These projects are only achievable if you work together. It's never going to be the contractor that's going to do it. It's never going to be the council that's going to do it. It's never going to be the likes of Weev who are going to do it. It's a collaboration of everybody working together as a single identity to ultimately get chargers in the ground. That's how you build EV networks.
Very well said. Definitely agree on that one. And my kind of final nugget of wisdom, I guess, for for any local authority that's looking to expand its charging infrastructure, and having seen what's been achieved in the Faster project today, is not just to collaborate in a very similar manner to the Faster project, but obviously to do your due diligence as well. We've seen this too many times in the past, when salespeople have been believed at face value, and then chargers have been put in the ground that have just been left to rot due to bad quality aftermarket support, dodgy back offices, etc. It doesn't take a genie to realize which recharge networks are off the pulse. So just do your due diligence, and honestly, ask other local authorities or shopping centres or whoever it is who've got the chargers. It's like, okay, you've got this network too. How do you find them? Ask EV drivers as well. And in terms of the specific makes and models of hardware too, do you find they're well supported? Are they reliable, etc.? There's a couple of emails and phone calls that will save you potentially millions of euros worth of having to buy cheap, buy twice, effectively. So that's my final nugget of wisdom. But from what I've seen, the Republic of Ireland is in very safe hands, not just within the Faster project, but going beyond as well. It's been fantastic listening to the wisdom of such an incredibly knowledgeable, passionate and proactive panel. So once again, I would love to thank Pádraig McBride from Louth County Council. I'd love to thank Michael McGrath from Zevi, Matthew Seeley from Irish EV Association, Philip Rainey from Weev, Gareth Loye from M Contractors, Sharon Digby from East Border Region, and of course, the man who's been holding everything together, Donald Monaghan, who is basically Mr. Faster Project from Southwest College. So we will see you tomorrow for the very last webinar in the Faster Project series. I don't want to think about that too much. That's been a good 2 years of my life helping to bring together all of these fascinating guests and talk about various kind of nitty-gritty hot topics. But also, obviously, there was some content that was focused very much at people who are new to electric vehicles, and the feedback we've had has generally been pretty positive from what I've seen. So I'm glad that we've, or rather all of these wonderful panelists have helped to make such a profoundly positive difference. But tomorrow is the box office event, the final the final webinar, I should say. And we're going to be looking at how things have panned out in Northern Ireland for the Faster project, arguably the region of the Faster project that needed this infrastructure the most, that has the most hurdles to face. Let's see what's been achieved. So I will see you same time tomorrow, 10 a.m., 23rd of November. I will see you tomorrow. Take care.